Oh, yes. I saved one for you. Yes. Good. Now they can start.
Welcome, everyone. We now have a quorum, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like to ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Shanahan and Mr. Deemer, I would like to, before we approve the agenda, ask if it's okay that we reorder the agenda and move item number 9 ahead of 7, so we take it first. Well, it's not the regular calendar, but it allow us, because I would imagine most folks in here are for item 9, and that way I know Bill Marble needs to leave at 5 o'clock. I would prefer to have him part of the full discussion.
That's acceptable.
Okay. With that change, can I have will someone please move the agenda?
The agenda?
Been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That moves us to public comments. And if there are anything folks would like to say other than items that are on our agenda, or if you have to leave early, and my preference would be, if you're here for item 9, to please stay if you can, since I've just reordered that. My preference would be that you only speak to items that are not on the agenda. Anybody out there that would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Because it's not on the agenda? Please come forward then.
Hi there, board members. Mikos Febersoon, resident of Davis. I'd just like to comment on the 3-minute rule that generally applies, and I'll read this so I can adhere to that at this point. Recognizing that there are constraints upon the time available for these board meetings and the time limits for public input may of necessity be imposed, such time limits should be reasonable and flexible. Limits should serve to make speech concise, non-repetitive, direct, and to the point. But limits should not be imposed in a manner that curtails the submission of valuable information or results in the incomplete presentation of points of view that may differ from those proposed by staff, board members, or other speakers. Just as staff and staff's consultants are permitted adequate time to make their presentation, so too should members of the public be allowed the time necessary to make their point and present their information when that information is clearly relevant to the topic under consideration. When instead arbitrary time limits are imposed that prevent or preclude the completion of commentary or other input, it is inconsiderate of the time invested by those who come before this board with the intention of making a contribution for the public good. If the board desires to minimize the length of these meetings and believes it is necessary to rigidly adhere to the 3-minute limit, that it should propose another mechanism or process to receive the public's input whenever that input is likely to exceed the imposed limit, just as it did when it formed the Citizens Water Advisory Committee. At our initial appearance before the board in June 2011, we were cut off from making a full, coherent presentation and instead had to scramble to chop it up into multiple 3-minute segments in order to comply with the imposed time limit. At the last meeting, there were several comments made by board members directly to us and to which we would have liked to respond. We also would have liked to respond to an assertion made by the board's counsel with which we disagreed. We had no opportunity to do so, and I believe the public interest was not well served as a consequence. At today's board meeting, we have a series of comments to make on agenda item number 9 and about the responses made by the prospective bidders to the ethics questionnaire, as well as about the efficacy of the analyses of those responses and the conclusions made by agency staff. So I expect that we're going to require more than 3 minutes that any one of us can do. So I would ask that you allow us to make that our presentation. We will endeavor to be as brief and concise as we can.
Your 3 minutes are up, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Jim Burchill, Davis resident. I object to Mikos's just the comments he made. Basically, the process here is being manipulated on an international basis by people who have their own agenda, which is separate of our agenda locally. In terms of access to this body, you're following the rules that are the tradition of the groups in this area. And his point about 3 minutes, the way you solve that, and Steve knows from how in Davis is, if you've got more than 3 minutes, you have more than one person to speak to your issues, and you divide it up. And I have done that in terms of the people who are very supportive of the project. I also, Steve, and this is the second time you've done that, other people come here and make the trip here and have time commitments also. If it's on the agenda, it should be taken up when the agenda is to be heard. It creates an uneven playing field to do it this way. But I'm sorry, that's my 3 minutes. I've said what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We will, as a body, address the time for public comments on the item when we get to the item. Any further public comment on items not on the agenda? Thank you. That moves us to the next item, which is our consent calendar.
Move the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That then takes us to item 2, which is the Woodland Davis Water Supply Project update.
Yes, Chairman Souza and board members, I have a very brief update for you this afternoon. It's just been 1 month since we last met. What I would like to do is provide you with a summary of the recent activities and accomplishments since we last met, preview the upcoming activities for the next 3 months, and give you a schedule update. Activities and accomplishments in the past month included continued participation in the 2012 cap-to-cap planning. We completed the review of the 60% design of the joint intake facility. We have prepared a draft budget for your consideration this afternoon. Ethics submittals and review, again, on today's agenda. And we continue to provide support for both the Woodland 218 process and the Davis Water Advisory Committee undertaking. We've submitted the 404 Army permit to the Army Corps. This is one of the more significant permits that needs to be obtained for the project. We've toured the site, alignment of the pipelines with Fish and Wildlife Service, and we've held an additional follow-up meeting with Yolo County regarding the pipeline alignments in the county roads, and that meeting was very productive. We conducted a site visit with the California Department of Public Health regarding the treatment plant site, and you'll hear more about that later in the agenda. In terms of activities over the next 3 months, you have an item on your agenda to consider the location of the regional water treatment facility. We'll be discussing that. We do need to complete the CEQA work, appraisal work, and geotechnical work for an alternative site if the board concurs with that recommendation. We'll need to complete the site field design. We'll continue our property acquisition efforts. We will be completing the 100% design of the facility, the intake facility, in the July timeframe, and be finalizing the budget for next year. This slide identifies a number of the permitting and regulatory activities that are underway. We'll need to submit a Section 401 permit to the regional board for our water quality certification. We'll be needing to prepare an addendum to CEQA documentation for one of the pipeline alignments in Davis. We'll continue to work with the Health Department on the water treatment permit, as well as Yolo County regarding easements and right-of-way. We will be participating in the Cap-to-Cap event in Washington, D.C. shortly. Both Directors Doty and Marble will be attending and representing the agency. We plan to conduct an intake workshop with all of the DBO teams to make sure that all of the teams are aware of and familiar with and have an opportunity to provide input into that design. And there is planned continued work on the Woodland ASR program. We have a PG&E power distribution system study underway, and we will continue efforts to support the Davis Water Advisory Committee. This is a table that you saw a month ago. Not much has changed. We've adjusted the land easement acquisition slightly from June to July, and we remain on track to issue the final RFP for the design build operate contract in December. This is the schedule that we showed you last time. We have no changes to that schedule. We are still projecting a completion of the construction and startup of the project in 2016. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deemer. And I'd also remind the public that we have speaker request cards. If you want to speak to any item on the agenda, could you please fill them out and bring them over to our secretary, please? That'll move us to item 3, which is the treasurer auditor position.
Yes, Chairman Sousa and board members, in your packet, we have a brief memo that describes the status of the agency treasurer auditor position. If you're aware, our current auditor treasurer is going to become the new city manager. So he's given a vacancy at the agency. The good news is that he's not going too far, and also as indicated in your staff report, he was ready to stay on and provide that function until we can identify and select a replacement. We have several alternatives for doing that, both internal candidates as well as external candidates. We can't hear you very well. Thank you. We have a number of options that we're evaluating, consideration of internal candidates, external candidates, as well as a reassignment or reallocation of the duties. We hope to complete that analysis and be in a position to make a recommendation to the agency board at our next meeting.
Questions? Yes, Marty.
You mentioned external candidates.
Yeah.
Haven't we used both the treasurer and secretarial positions internally with other?
We have. The challenge is going to be, and we'll be working closely with Mr. Navazio on this, is identifying an individual internally that has the expertise and time available to provide this function. I think I'm safe in saying that would be our first choice, and so we need to see if we can make that happen, and the external candidates would come into play if that's not feasible or possible.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Question I would have, this would go to either Marty or Bill or Mr. Meyer. Where does your city manager generally sit?
Right there.
Okay, so he isn't warm enough the seat yet. All right, thank you.
He's not officially on until
We already had that
3:30.
discussion prior to the meeting today.
Okay, thanks. Having no other questions, this is a discussion item. There is no action required. We'll move us to item 4, which is the project financing update.
I'd ask Mr. Navazio to address that item.
Yes, thank you, members of the board. This is, as I understand, a standing item on your agenda. We don't have a specific update to present, although we do anticipate, given the progress that's being made both on the project as well as with the two respective cities and agency partners relative to our rate-setting exercise, that we will likely provide a more extensive update at either your May or your June meeting. As I mentioned at your last meeting, most of the work, particularly on the finance side, on the part of both agencies, has been almost entirely focused and directed at the rate-setting process. Clearly within that exercise, we continue to look at not only the full array of financing options that will ultimately hopefully be available, but also with a keen eye towards how they impact the two cities' rates going forward. As the general manager and members of the board pointed out at your last meeting, some of the discussions that occurred in the recent trip to Washington, D.C. Were focused specifically on exploring additional financing options. We are planning, and honestly we haven't done this yet, but we're planning to reconvene the finance team for the project here in the next couple of weeks to integrate the information that came back from that trip with the ongoing effort on the part of the two agencies to look at local and state funding options. And I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think we have the ability to bring back to the board at one of your next two meetings a specific timeline and work plan that addresses prioritizing where the likely or the best financing options for the project are going to come. So again, this is a standing item on your agenda, and I anticipate at either your May or June meeting, as we get through the budget and further on in our respective rate-setting processes, we'll be refocusing very specifically on the most appropriate funding options. We can answer any questions.
Questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. With no questions, this is also an update, no actions taken. Question I would have only has to do with item number 8. Mr. Deemer, will you be presenting the budget so that...
Yes.
Okay. Because I know that Mr. Navasio has to leave at an earlier time. So thank you. That then moves us to item 5, which is consider approval of amendment number 1 to the General Manager Service Agreement to include secretarial services beginning July 1st, 2012, and related termination of agreement for secretarial service with the City of Davis.
As Chair says, board members, for purposes of this item, I'm here representing Deemer Engineering, not the agency general manager, so I'm going to turn this item over to Mr. Shanahan.
Good afternoon, board members. This item relates to a proposed amendment to our General Manager Services Agreement. Currently, our current staffing for administration purposes, I'm flanked by Lynanne Melhalf, our secretary, who is contracted to the agency through the City of Davis, and on my right is Dennis Deemer, who is our general manager, who's contracted to the agency through a contract with Deemer Engineering Incorporated, a small corporation owned by Mr. Deemer. And that arrangement is and has been working very well. Ms. Melhalf informs us that she intends to retire from the City of Davis in June. Congratulations to her. But there's an interest on her part, as well as on Dennis's part, that after she departs the City of Davis, that perhaps she could continue in her role as secretary to the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency. Lynanne and Dennis have discussed this proposal and have come up with a proposed plan to explore with the board, and that plan would involve, after Ms. Melhalf retires from Davis, she would be employed by Deemer Engineering Incorporated, and as an employee of Deemer Engineering, she could, through that contract, continue to provide secretarial and admin support services to the agency. So what's before you is a proposed amendment to the Deemer Engineering Services Agreement that would do a few things. First of all, it would expand the scope of work under that agreement to include the admin and secretarial work that's set forth in Exhibit A to that proposed amendment number 1. Secondly, it would expand the fee under that contract. Currently, the fee paid to the City of Davis for these services is $41 per hour, and the fee through Deemer Engineering contract would remain at $41 per hour. Next, the proposed amendment under the current agreement with Deemer Engineering, we provide in that contract that the agency will provide secretarial and admin services to Deemer Engineering through the City of Davis. Those provisions would then come out. And then there's a last issue related to the proposed amendment that's largely unrelated to the Secretary Services position, and that is when the board retained Deemer Engineering earlier in the fiscal year, the decision was made to put a $150,000 cap on the cost of engineering services for the 10-11 fiscal year. And as explained in your staff report, with expenditures to date and the rate of current and expected expenditures through the end of the fiscal year, it's likely that the Deemer Engineering Consulting Services would exceed that $150,000 cap, which would put Dennis in the position where he'd have to stop working sometime in May or June. So the related proposal is to expand that not to exceed cost from $150,000 to $200,000. The staff report explains the unanticipated circumstances that have led to the sort of the level of effort by Mr. Deemer greater than we anticipated several months ago. So that's the first action item proposed, and then the second is the proposed amendment to the Deemer engineering contract, and then the second related piece on the action item is to concurrently terminate the existing City of Davis, Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency agreement for secretarial services. So staff recommends these changes. The secretary change would take effect on July 1. The change on the contract cap would take effect immediately. Are there any questions?
I do. Yeah, my only, Lenan has done an absolutely great job. That's not an issue at all. My only question is, have we fully vetted this with both city management folks to ensure that we don't have somebody currently on payroll that we need that opportunity to avoid a layoff or something like that? I just
I'm not in a
want to
position
make
to
sure
answer that.
that
Is somebody else able to? I have not been involved in that vetting, but perhaps somebody else has.
Okay, I think before I'd be in a position to approve that amendment, unless it was a month-to-month kind of thing, I'd want to make sure we had done that due diligence.
Mr. Meyer, Mr. Bosio?
Yeah, I would just say that from, at least as far as I'm aware, the proposal as presented has been kind of discussed and shared, but Board Member Marble, if your question is, has it been fully vetted with the issues that you have in mind, I venture to say that we haven't fully explored what other potential options are. So,
yeah, no, I'm not aware of any. I'm not trying to alter that. I just think in the current environment that we have, we ought to be doing that.
Bill asked exactly my question, and in as tactful a way as he could. So I would counsel that we wait and pause just a little bit on this. I would like to hear from our city manager on it specifically before I move forward.
It wouldn't take effect till July 1st. We've got time to wait, I think. Again, Lynn's been fantastic and keeps me on task and updated. But I think we could split this item, and I think we need to approve the cap increase right now, and then ask for it to come back at our next meeting if we have an. I'm not aware of anybody in Woodland that's in the position to offer the support that she is, that's facing layoff. But I don't know for sure.
We have at least one meeting before July 1st. We can put this off for 30 days and vet it through both.
I believe we have that time. Anybody disagree?
No, I think that.
Yeah, but I also agree with Ms. Doty that I do recommend on the separate item, if you're agreeable, you act on the increasing the cap.
Yeah. We need to do that now.
Questions from board members on the fees and expenses cap? Is there a motion for that portion of the recommendation?
I'll move that portion of the recommendation to extend the cap to $200,000 for the rest of the fiscal year.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. Look forward to having this coming back, and to whoever needs to take this to both councils, managements, appreciate it. That concludes item 5, and that takes us to item 6, which is review and discuss proposed change of the regional water treatment facility site location.
Yes, Chair Souza and board members, Jim Yost is going to make this presentation. I alluded to it in my project update that there is an opportunity to move to a different site, and so Jim will explain that alternative to you.
Good afternoon. Everybody's enjoying this beautiful summer weather, I presume.
Isn't it fantastic?
We really should give some credit to the City of
Is that mic on,
Public
Jim?
Works folks, because much of the impetus for coming up with this
Is your mic on?
is not on.
Susan's is off.
Oh, okay.
tricky little stinkers.
Okay? We're good? We're good. I was trying to say that much of the credit for coming up with this idea should go to the folks at the City of Woodland Public Works Department. They are the ones that came up with this idea of relocating the site. So let me just get you oriented. Here is County Road 24. This is the Woodland Wastewater Treatment Plant. Here's County Road 25, County Road 102, and 103. And this is the site where we had planned to locate the plant. This happens to be land owned by the City of Woodland, leased out to Pacific Coast producers who dispose of tomato waste on the site. We have been trying to find a way to route heavy truck traffic into this plant site for some time now, working with both PCP and Conaway Preservation Group. And they collectively were concerned about the impact that having this road might have on people's ability to intrude on their property. So we started looking for ways to get the road out there, and one of the alternatives was to go County Road 24, but as it turns out, there's a levee here, and it would be very expensive to tear that out and actually reconstruct that into a road suitable for heavy truck traffic. But simultaneous with our investigations, the city is looking at abandonment of these 9 ponds that used to be associated with the wastewater treatment plant, stored sludge there. They are planned to be converted into stormwater detention ponds. And lo and behold, all of the ponds aren't needed for that service. So the city said, how about using 2 of these ponds and locate the plant on that site? So that's what we intend to do. We're looking at that. We've given it a preliminary look, and I'll show you some of the results. It's good news. You see the costs over here for locating the plant on the currently planned site, and the costs if we move over to the Road 24 site results in a cost differential of about $3.9 million. As it turns out, the raw water pipeline length increases a little bit, and the Davis treated water pipelines increase a little bit. So Davis incurs a little more cost. However, the road costs go down substantially and Davis benefits. The bottom line, as you see from this footnote 2, is Davis's share of the cost is basically, it's the same. Works out to be the same. But Woodland would save $4 million because their treated water pipelines are greatly shortened, and they benefit from the more reduced scope and cost of the access road. It will cost about $250,000 to complete all the work necessary to relocate to that site. So this shows you the work that has to be done, a geotechnical investigation of the site before we fill it. We had gone through surveying and pre-design of the plant on the other site. We'd have to do that now on this one. It would require an addendum and a 404 permit update, title report, record of survey, appraisal report, and phase 1 environmental assessment. Now, one of the concerns that we had if we relocated to this site, it is relatively close to the wastewater treatment plant. So we wanted to confirm with the California Department of Public Health that there were no issues related to having the 2 plants that close together. They have been out for a site visit, and this morning, in fact, we received a letter from them basically saying they had some thoughts about conditions they wanted us to consider when we relocate there, but I don't see any of those being serious impediments at all to moving forward. And assuming we can meet those conditions, then I think we'll get their approval to do so. They actually expressed some concern. They had never physically visited the other site, and they had some concerns about locating there because of the tomato waste disposal in the area and some of the vector controls. So I think, in fact, they would prefer this site to the other one. To meet our project schedule, what we're looking for is a decision to allow us to move forward with the work that would begin with preparation of the CEQA addendum and preparation of the engineering work so that we can go to bid about the end of June, early July, get the bids late July, early August, and be able to go to the City of Davis. City of Davis took a different action than the City of Woodland. City of Woodland approved both the design of the site fill and its construction. City of Davis only approved the design. So we have to go back to the City of Davis with this contract amount. So hopefully we could do that in late August, come back to the board then and get your approval to award the construction contract and begin construction so that we could complete before the rains hit by about the middle of November. As it turns out, I failed to mention this, but the two cities have talked about these costs, and because most of the benefit of all of the financial benefit of moving to this new site accrues to the City of Woodland, so the City of Woodland has agreed that they would pay this additional cost to relocate the plant to this site. Any
Questions?
answer any questions?
Marty?
Yeah. Oh, no, you had, oh, you were, no, go first. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, given the past use of the site, is there any concerns about whether or not there could be any groundwater contamination, soil contamination, that by putting the plant there that then involves the agency in any future issues?
Yeah, there were concerns, and that was one of the concerns raised by CDPH. We actually have been monitoring the water quality underlying the site for some time now, and it appears to not be a problem. We have gotten approval from the regional board to have clean closure of the site, so I think all of those problems probably have disappeared.
Just a clarification, these are the ponds on the north side of 24?
That's correct.
Okay. Have they filled with water, or do we have any little vernal pool things going on here, or are they pretty much dried?
No, these are currently ponds that are used as holding ponds. They've been cleared they've been removed as sewage ponds and cleared as a storm drain detention basin.
Okay.
And we put drainage in to take care of. We just spent several $100,000 over the past year to prepare these ponds in the event that this became a decision that the board wanted to go forward with, that we're now prepared. They're all prepared for the construction of the site.
I'm assuming there's been so much construction here that we're not going to run afoul of any biologicals.
No.
Okay.
We've had our environmental folks out. They have checked over the site, and they don't see any concerns, other than just standard environmental concerns.
Right. We're not growing endangered species
No.
as bird speaks out there or anything. All right.
Joe, you have questions?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Just looking at the chart here, the 30-inch woodland pipeline, the 36-inch. If I'm looking at the drawing, it just doesn't look like $4 million worth of pipe that gets saved. So I'm just, I guess I'm wondering why it's that big. I'm impressed that it's that big, but. And we're not moving it that far. We're moving it, what, quarter mile, or we're moving it?
You can see the difference in length. That's about 5,500 feet. So collectively, there is quite a bit of pipe that would not have to be constructed.
Yeah, so it's about a mile.
Yeah.
That you do eliminate from the system. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at like $4 million a mile or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
I had just one other question. Does Davis City Council meet in the month of August?
No, we do not traditionally, but we've moved our recess such that we will be meeting beginning of August. We usually have just a business meeting.
I was just looking at this. It says that Davis City Council approval to award construction contract on August 21st.
Yeah.
Right.
That one will occur?
Right.
Okay.
Our break is going to be July 15 to August 15 this year. So, yeah,
All right, thanks.
we'll be welcomed back to town with this.
Big meeting.
We made the same change. That's curious.
Didn't we?
Question I would have is the cost of the access road. But, I mean, same similar question is, I can understand 36-inch pipes costing $4 million per mile, but the access road costs are going to decrease by $1.7 million.
We would have to improve this existing road, which is along, it's a country road, basically an agricultural road. So that would have to be improved so that we could, in fact, bring in large trucks delivering chemicals and other things to the treatment plant. So the problem, a lot of the cost is you can't have 90-degree curves right here and bring big trucks over those. So there's a lot of cost. And this intersection right here, bringing them into the plant, it's just amazing how it adds up. But that's the way it worked out. So as it turns out, then, all we've got to do is make improvements to a much shorter distance of County Road 24.
Okay, so it's a larger distance.
Yeah.
Got it. And is the same case with the intersection? You're still
We
gonna have to make
have to make some improvements
here.
to that intersection, yeah.
Okay.
We've got, I think, about $300,000 allocated for improvements at that intersection.
Got it. Comments or further questions? Any further
I
questions?
don't have a question. I just have a comment.
Comments, Bill.
Yeah, my only comment is, well, two comments. First of all, I'm glad staff's come up with something that saves money. That's great. My second comment is that because we're a partnership in this venture between Davis and Woodland, I think it's really crucial that we are not doing something that would not be perceived as fair. And I appreciate the explanation that's been given, and I do think it's appropriate for Woodland to then pay that extra $250,000 in that cost that was outlined. But I want to make sure that all of us know and the public knows that should we identify further cost savings, which we all hope we will, that we're committed as a board to making sure that we wouldn't be somehow penalizing one of our partners in the process. And so I'm glad that this isn't costing Davis anything, but if something in the middle of the process changed such that as you crunch your numbers, Woodland's still profiting, but Davis is settling in a deficit, I think it would be appropriate for the board to consider an adjustment. And if it were, the tables were turned, I think I would feel the same way. So I just want to, that's just a statement. It's, I support the item and am happy to do so.
I appreciate that, Bill, because I know that our council has had some discussion of the length of the actual treated water and the cost that is incurred because of a much longer distance. So in this case, we're actually shortening the treated water, but we're increasing the raw water distance, which in and of itself, you've got to place the treatment facility somewhere. And as you know and I know, we evaluated multiple sites along the river as to where we would put the straw in, and this was the least costly of all the locations because of the distance from the river to the plant. This is the shortest distance from the river to the plant. So we've decreased the cost of that raw water that would be incurred by both cities.
And we can't move the river.
We can't move the river, that is correct. Any further comments or questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move the item.
No, excuse me, this is not really an action item.
We're not.
And the reason being, this item's subject to CEQA review. But before we spent the agency's money on the CEQA review, we wanted to make sure the board preliminarily approved this direction.
We will accept the review and discussion then. Thank you. That will then move us to item 9. Since we reordered the agenda, we will take that item first. Again, I would ask folks, if you have not submitted speakers' request cards, please do so. And along that lines, I have quite a few speaker request cards here. We did have, Joe, you weren't here for public comment, but we did have a request and comment concerning the time limitation that we would be placing upon, or I would be replacing at my discretion, unless overridden by the members of this body, to limit public comments, since we have so many folks that want to speak to us, to a 3-minute period. And as you know, in our city, we generally will aggregate, if at all possible, any speakers, and we would then give a extended period. If the board does not want to choose to override my decision, I am going to stand by that we will give 5 minutes to 3 people if they would like to speak, if one person would like to speak on behalf of those 3 folks. If not, then we're going to stand by the 3-minute period for each and every speaker, unless anybody else up here sees fit that we should change that.
Sounds just fine to me. I've thought about this issue so much myself. Good.
All right.
You're being, I would note you're being more generous than the Davis mayor is in these situations.
Yeah, I would add one comment, just for those that wish to comment. You're here to be heard, and we want to hear you. That's not the issue in my mind. You've all had an opportunity to contact us individually, by phone, by email, by whatever means, and that to me is the place to, if you have an extended presentation, this, you're not here to give a presentation in my mind, you're here to make public comment on the action item that's before us. And if some of you have the same thing to say as someone has already said, I would prefer you to just either come to the mic and say, I fully agree, I want you to know that's where my support is, but I'd prefer it not become repetitive. But you're in charge, Mr. Chair.
And I will ask folks to come forward in the order unless there is an aggregation, and then I'll pull the 3 folks who have submitted a card to speak for a 5-minute period on behalf, or the one person speaking on behalf. So when we get to that point, I will start calling folks, because I understand someone in the back didn't hear me. I will ask the 3 folks if you want to go in that fashion. You also have another path. If you want to speak as individuals, you can speak your 3 minutes, but if you have a longer presentation, you can present that to subsequent people. It's keeping within the parameters of 3 minutes per person. You can choose to do it in any fashion that you would like, but that's what I would like to operate under so that we can move the meeting along efficiently. And I, too, am very cognizant of our free speech rights, but I am the chair of this body, and I have a duty to try and operate in an efficient manner. Mr. Deemer, who is going to begin the presentation?
Mr. Shanahan will make the opening comments.
And I have members. I have asked Mr. Shanahan to specifically speak to some of the legal parameters under which we operate when it comes to dismissal of any of the entities, any of the DBO teams. So, Mr. Shanahan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa, members of the board. First, a bit of background. This item relates to the agency's DBO procurement process. Some time ago, the agency board decided to procure a sort of a master contractor to design, construct, and operate your water project, and that procurement effort is a long, multi-phase effort. In January 2011, we distributed the RFQ, request for qualification, sort of a first step in the process, and through the RFQ process in June of 11, we received selected rather 3 teams, a CH2M Hill team, a United Water CDM team, and a Veolia Water team, to proceed with the next phase of the procurement, which would be the request for proposal phase. The request for proposal phase is scheduled to begin later 2011, beginning at later 2012, beginning of 13. During the RFQ process, the board said several meetings on this, and several questions have been raised concerning the business ethics of some of the proposer teams. The initial thought was, well, we'll take a look at that when the teams all submit their responses to the RFP. Upon reevaluation, though, staff and the board concurred that that really wouldn't be fair to the DBO proposer teams to have them, they're going to be spending millions of dollars responding to your RFP, and then to come along at that phase and say, well, gosh, you submitted a good proposal, but we have questions and dissatisfied with your company's business ethics, so you're disqualified on that basis. So instead, what the board decided to do back in January, the board directed your general manager to prepare and distribute what we called a request for additional information concerning business ethics. The board reviewed and approved that request in January. It went out shortly thereafter. And the purpose of this review is to have a sort of a one-time, upfront review of the various companies and their business ethics and make what I would characterize as sort of a thumbs-up or thumbs-down decision on the qualifications, ethical qualifications of each team and the companies within each team to proceed with the RFP. Staff has worked on this process for several months, and as one who's been doing California Public Works projects for several decades now, I've never done anything like this, and I don't think the colleagues who I worked with have done anything like this. So what the board's doing here is very unconventional, but noteworthy for the agency to take this step. So as the process unfolded, the request, as I said, went out in January of 2012. At your board's January meeting, as you may recall, there was a significant discussion about the scope of that review. And the issue there was which teams and which companies within the corporate chain are going to be subject to the review and are we going to request information from. And at that meeting, the decision was made to request information from the primary teams that you're going to be contracting with, as well as the guarantors. For each team, we're requesting the team to have a guarantee company with adequate financial strength to sort of stand behind the main contracting parties. And that's significant because, as we'll get to later, many of the comments you've received have dealt with Veolia Transportation. We'll talk about that in a minute. But significantly for the agency is when you look at the Veolia structure of companies, the agency is the guarantor. The big company you'll be dealing with involving Veolia is Veolia Water North America Operating Services Incorporated, and that's a North American-based company, a very sizable company in its own right. And through the RFQ process, the agency and its accountants evaluated the financial strength and stability of that Veolia company and concluded that that company is indeed a viable, sizable company that can serve as an adequate, secure guarantor. So on the Veolia team, the guarantor is Veolia Water North America. It is not Veolia Environment, the French-based company that has a series of companies under it. The objective of this process is, as stated in the, I just want to read one part from the request that went out to the DBO teams, because this sort of frames the issue for the board and the task facing you, and that is to determine whether the company team adheres to reasonable ethical principles and standards. If the agency determines that, in considering the totality of the company team members and their operations and contracts throughout the scope of the company's operations, the company team adheres to reasonable ethical principles and standards in the conduct of their businesses, then the agency will affirm the qualifications of the team to proceed with the RFP. Conversely, if the agency board determines that, in considering the totality of the company team and their operation and contracts, the team does not adhere to reasonable ethical principles and standards in the conduct of their businesses, then the agency will find that the team is not qualified to proceed with the RFP. So that's the task facing this agency. We received very detailed responses from the three proposer teams, binders worth of materials that were evaluated by staff. The company responses also have been posted on the agency website for review by the board members as well as interested members of the public, and we've received numerous written public comments. In your agenda packet, there is a staff report. Let me back up first. At a staff level, each company response was evaluated by a primary team, staff team of Jerry Gilbert, Lindsay Smith, West Yost, and myself. We each independently reviewed all the proposals and put together our evaluation and thoughts, and then consolidated and a staff report and an evaluation matrix that's part of that staff report. That information was then submitted to General Manager Dennis Deemer, who likewise reviewed and commented and edited on that staff report. And what's in your agenda packet now is a staff report from Mr. Deemer setting forth his evaluations and recommendations. I don't intend to review the staff report in detail. There's a lot of information there, and hopefully the board has had an opportunity to review it. But the bottom line from staff perspective is we've concluded that each proposer company adheres to reasonable ethical principles and standards in the conduct of their businesses, and we've determined that none of the teams should be disqualified, and we therefore recommend that the agency board affirm the qualifications of each three of the teams to proceed. If the agency board decides that it wants to reject one of the teams for reasons stated, it's important for that at that point then it should be a two-step process, because the board, if it goes in and does not follow staff's recommendation, but instead decides that the board wants to reject the team, it's important to then give direction to staff about the reasons for that, and the reasons should be based on the information provided by staff and otherwise provided to the agency, and then we would need to prepare findings to justify the rationale for the dismissal, because it's important that the board not act arbitrarily or based on evidence outside the record, but you're acting based on solid, credible information, and that we have a firm basis upon which to act. If the board does indeed have concerns about the ethical principles of one of these companies, you do have the authority to reject them, but it's important that we so explain and that finding and the evidence that supports that finding. Lastly, I just want to comment on the written comments that have been received. Many comments have been received, and the board members all have copies of them, except a handful of comments came in at this meeting that I suspect the directors don't have copies of. Interestingly, based on the ones I have reviewed, all of the comments, written comments that we've received, deal with Veolia Transportation, which is a sort of the busing and rail arm of Veolia Environment, and in particular Veolia Transportation's services and programs in Israel. Significantly, following up on what I said earlier, this agency will not be contracting with Veolia Transportation. Veolia Transportation is not the guarantor, and Veolia Transportation is not under Veolia Water North America. So the relevancy of the Veolia Transportation issues based on the decision reached by this board in January, there's not much relevancy there. But you're going to receive a lot of oral comment on it, and you've received a lot of written comment as well. In the agenda packet, there were several comments that made it in the agenda packet. Those were essentially all negative on Veolia. Since then, I've lost track of my numbers, but these are rough numbers. Since then, the agenda packet went out. We've received about 30 more written comments, and of those, they're more split. Of those, approximately 20 or so favor Veolia's position and urge the board not to reject Veolia, and 10 or so are negative, unfavorable towards Veolia. To me, the public comments received show that you've received comments on both sides of the issues. The public comments pretty much affirm what we all know, and that is the situation in Israel is a complex issue with multiple sides to it, and there's no easy answer or right or wrong. And I don't think we're going to resolve that issue in this proceeding. From staff's perspective, based on the public comments that we've been received so far, we didn't see anything in the public comments that would cause staff to change our recommendations. So with that, stand available for any questions the board may have.
Questions? None? Without questions, then I will move to public comments. So folks do not want to aggregate in presentation. If no aggregation, then I'm just going to move in the order that I received each one of these request cards. And the first person is Mr. George Rooks.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity of speaking here today. I'm here, well, I'm a retired faculty member at UC Davis, but I'm here really as a resident of Davis for 6 months every year, and also a resident of Israel for the other 6 months. Today, I just want to briefly address one of the falsehoods I think that has been perpetrated by the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement concerning Veolia transportation, and I understood from your comments that maybe this may be irrelevant, but that particular comment is that Veolia discriminates against Palestinians and Israeli Arabs in their transportation policies. What I'd like to say is that my wife and I have actually ridden on numerous occasions, I might add, Veolia operated and or owned transportation in the past year, ranging from the Jerusalem light rail system to bus lines 109 and 110 that go from Jerusalem to communities like Mivosh, Horon, and Har Shmuel, to bus lines that go from our home in Ashdod, actually to my in-laws' house in Des Ziona. So we ride the buses quite a bit, and we ride the trains a lot. On virtually every single bus trip we've ever taken, and every train trip we've ever taken, there were Israeli Arabs and Palestinian Arabs riding on the transportation. For example, one place we go a lot is to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem we regularly take the route from the Jerusalem Central bus station, which kind of goes up a hill and then down toward the old city, toward the north wall. And then it kind of curves around and goes back up toward Hebrew University, and in the process goes through a lot of neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. Every time we ride, the cars are packed with Jerusalem Arabs. I mean, I would say that on virtually every occasion, most people in the train cars have been from those particular communities. So, in sum, and I only have 3 minutes, I'd just like to say that the idea that Veolia somehow discriminates against Arabs or Palestinians by operating transportation lines is, I believe, absurd. I mean, just based on my everyday experience there. And I also think it's really something that it means that Veolia should be included in the bidding process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just so you know, I'm using my iPhone stopwatch here, and you were about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Mr. Rooks. I will, to be fair, I'll give you a little wrap-up as you're approaching the 3 minutes in case you're, so that you know to wrap it up, please. Next, Mr. Jerry Adler. So if I look a little distracted, I'm looking at the stopwatch as I'm trying to listen to, and forgive me for that, please.
Jerry Adler, a homeowner in Davis and a resident in El Macero. Some months ago, I received this document, which you recognize as one of your documents, which contains the draft procurement documents. I received it as a member of the Davis Water Advisory Committee, and I read it. And I was very impressed by what I read, because what I read was a process that was going to be fair, multiple checkpoints, and it was going to result in a good provider for this aspect of the project. I've also seen at length documents relating otherwise to the DBO process as well as to the surface water project. You're here on your dais, and you're here in your capacities that do not deal in any way with international affairs. It was in 1972 that the Davis City Council called for an end to the Vietnam War, and it ended, and the Davis City Council has never lost the power that it realized it had then because the war ended. I hope that you don't want to go down that road. You clearly do not understand all of the ramifications of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you don't want to go there. Neither do you want to go to a place where you become a subject for discussion. You, as a board, become a subject for discussion as opposed to the merits of the surface water project or any aspect of it. And if you were to reject one of the pre-qualified bidders on this project, you will become a subject of discussion. You will distract from the project, and you will detract from the project, and you threaten the project. If you want to keep the project moving along on its merits, don't go down the road of internationalization and politicization of these issues. Stick to that for which you've been appointed by your respective councils. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Miss Julia Hunter-Blair. You want to aggregate? Okay. Is there someone else that wants to do that? And Mr. Mikos Fabrasani is next up. So are you going to allow?
There's 2 of us. I guess we'd like to split 5 minutes unless you want to give us 6 minutes.
It has to take 3 people to get 5 minutes, or you can speak in serial, and by that I mean you would have to then pass it, your whatever you wanted to say, on to the next person when the 3 minutes is up, and on to the next person if you wanted to do that. I know I'm more complicated than one would hope, but I'm trying to be fair. So, Mr. Fabrasani,
We'll take 5 minutes.
and you will be speaking on behalf of who?
Well, I'll be
3 people,
speaking
could
on
I?
behalf of Julia Hunter-Blair. I'll be speaking on behalf of David Mandel.
David Mann.
And myself.
Great. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, as I commented during the public comment period, this process, what it's done is essentially shut down the opportunity to make a full presentation, as you'll see, because you'll have to cut me off in the middle of this. I'm going to first focus on CH2M Hill. Staff's report on page 3 under evaluation findings says CH2M Hill response did not disclose any complaints, charges, or investigations as described in section 2D and E of the request. Likewise, agency staff is not aware of any complaints, charges, or investigations against CH2M Hill companies. However, had we not been confined to the talking limit at the September 28th, 2011 meeting, we would have presented the results of our own research into CH2M Hill and CDM, a copy of which I may have left with you or with the board secretary on that date, but in the event that I didn't, I'm going to distribute this now. And in that document, I go over CH2M Hill and CDM. The document that I cited then, there was a report by the Associated Press only 6 days before your board meeting that a subsidiary of CH2M Hill paid $1.5 million to resolve allegations that it had submitted false claims and paid kickbacks relating to a federal contract to manage mixed radioactive waste at the Hanford nuclear site in south central Washington state. The Project for Government Oversight, which has a database, listed 8 instances of misconduct between 1995 and 2011, amounting to $2.8 million. Whether the Clean Water Agency Board considers this misconduct as significant is for you board members to debate. What is less debatable is whether agency staff did an adequate job of searching for evidence of wrongdoing. It seems clear to me that they did not. As I recall, it took me less than 15 minutes using an internet search engine to learn of these violations. Turning to CDM constructors, in that same document, we also reported on an August 18, 2011 letter from the Utility Workers Union of America. And I think the board staff did mention that United Water disclosed the indictment, United Water being a subsidiary, although staff understated the seriousness by indicating that it was one charge instead of a 26-count indictment. Staff concludes by stating this one charge involving 2 company employees is not sufficient reason to disqualify the team from bidding. But it's important to note that these employees were company managers, not simply workers in the field. Turning now to Veolia, and I'm going to have to skip some of what I had to say, which is that, or I'll summarize very quickly, the Veolia Environment has a corporate code of ethics document that's supposed to be ruling for all the companies under its jurisdiction, or on its family of companies. I noticed that Veolia Water North America did not submit a copy of that document, so therefore I believe it's its submission was not responsive. There are other things that I can comment on about that document, but I'll just go to one, which they reference the UN Global Compact, which admonishes all companies to take necessary measures to avoid complicity in human rights violations by government actors in relation to all aspects of the company's operations. And regarding those violations, we've spoken before. I'm presenting, you should have a copy in front of you of a letter that was derived from an online letter that was signed by 279 people, one of whom we have to remove from the list because that's Dr. David Siegel, who had a complaint about that. But this is I didn't make copies of this for everybody, but this is a listing of all of those people, and I will leave the one copy I have with you. 11 people from the city of Davis. There were probably just as many from around the world that had a complaint about VLA's actions. But aside from the concern about the parent company, Veolia, what I want to bring my attention to in the remaining time is what Veolia Water has done domestically in the United States, and I think this is what you should be concerned about if you believe the other information about international activities is irrelevant. And this is, some of this is produced by Ralph Nader's organization, Public Citizen, in 2005, as well as a campaign referendum fact sheet called No One Deal, No One Out.
Wrap it up, please.
Okay, I'll go over this quickly. Burlingame, 2008, the city was targeted for a lawsuit for Veolia's dumping of more than 10,000 gallons of wastewater. Richmond, 2011, there's also a contract termination. Petaluma, 2007, city voted to take back management of sewer system from Veolia. Lynn, Massachusetts, 1999, likewise. Indianapolis, likewise. Rockland, Massachusetts. I could keep going. And this is precisely why I made my comment, Steve, that you need to hear all of this. This is information that this board needs to hear.
I have asked you to please adhere, and everybody else has, so would you please do so?
I think that this is a travesty of providing information. I'm sorry that you feel rigid about this.
You can provide any further information to us in written form, and we will read it as I've read, and I believe my colleagues have done the same with all of that written comment that has come to us.
Well, it doesn't appear that it was read because the staff report seemed to ignore that, and that's why I'm standing up here.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Gail Rubin, and after Ms. Rubin, we have Al Socolow. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Gail Rubin, 13-year resident of the city of Davis, county of Yolo, retired state attorney, and professionally also engaged in CEQA work. So I'm quite familiar with your process, and an arduous one and tedious one at times it is. I come here before you to express a state of bitter irony, because today is Yom HaZikaron, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day, which in Israel is honored by moments of silence and worldwide, those that were slaughtered. And how did this begin? Words. Words kill. Words begin with incremental steps to defame and slander a people to the point where they become lethal. As a body, I don't need to remind you, you are engaged in a CEQA process, both under federal law and state law mandates. As a local entity, I will quote from California Constitution, Article 11, Section 7. Under the police power granted by the Constitution, counties and cities have plenary authority to govern, subject only to the limitation that they exercise this power within their territorial limits and subordinate to state law. You are prohibited to discriminate on the basis of race, sex, color, religion, ethnicity, national origin, ancestry, etc., lawful occupation, or age. You are also under mandates from federal law Title VI, which parallels those mandates. I call your attention to back in 1977 when Congress passed a law creating the Office of Anti-Boycott Compliance with the Department of Commerce in response to the Arab boycott of Israel. The law prohibits the U.S. from taking certain actions in support of an unsanctioned foreign boycott against a country, Israel, that is friendly to the United States. I'm very saddened here that this board even would entertain such a notion. Would you discriminate based on the citizenship or ethnic origin of a business or a contractor? Would you have your subcontractors include in their bids and contracting to discriminate against, let's say, somebody who says they're Jewish or a citizen of Israel or has a family member associated with Viola in violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act? Not since the 1930s have careless rumors been spread to defame an entire people. But moreover, I know what it feels like as a Jew to have these words cast, but I cannot imagine what it's like to be a black South African and suffer that unique pain of apartheid and have these folks defame me as a black African carelessly and use that word to incriminate others.
Could you wrap it up, please?
Thus, I ask you to do the right thing, to do the American thing, obey the law and the Constitution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Al Sokolow is up next, and then Mr. David Thompson after that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I am Al Sokolow, longtime resident of Davis, 47 years, and I have family in Woodland also. You have important work to do for the people of our two cities to develop and complete this needed project. I regret that misplaced comments about the merits of Veolia have forced you to divert your attention away from the main purpose of the agency. This is a false issue which is totally irrelevant to the local and regional purpose of the authority. I see no reason not to include Veolia as a legitimate bidder on the project and to move on to the real work of the agency for the benefit of our two cities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Thompson's up, and then Mr. Matt Kelly. I think Mr. Thompson, is he outside there? Mr. Thompson is not here, so we'll move on to Mr. Matt Kelly, and after that is Mr. Jim Burchell.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. My name is Matt Kelly, and I represent the Sacramento Building and Construction Trades Council. We're a labor organization that represents 25,000 construction workers, union construction workers in the Sacramento and surrounding counties. Our feeling on this project is that you have shortlisted qualified people to propose on this project. We believe that that list needs to stay intact. Removing one of those from that list will cause a delay in this project and cause harm to the people that I represent that are looking forward to working on this project at some point in time. So at this time, I would encourage you to stay with staff's recommendation and make sure that any steps that you take today don't cause delays in this project, because ultimately that means an increase in cost, and that's something that the city certainly doesn't want to see, or the water agency, I should say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jim Burchell is up, and then Mr. Jack Medore, I believe. I hope I got that correct.
Jim Burchell, Davis resident and ratepayer in Davis. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. Most people, what I want to say has been said, but I do have a lot of anger about this subject.
Jim, can you adjust the mic to your...
I'm sorry. I have a lot of anger about this subject and the methodologies that have been used. This process is being manipulated. It's being manipulated as part of what is a public relations worldwide program. The letters you got that you announced, a lot of them were generated by a web page out of Jerusalem. Okay, this is a common tactic of BDS. They find a target, Davis Co-op, Sacramento Co-op, and they milk it to see how much press they can get on their issue. They're a single issue interest group. They talk and talk until the group finds no interest in listening to them anymore, and they move on and target another opportunity. We've spent all of the time we need and the ratepayers' money on an issue that is an international issue, and I really am offended that our grassroots process is being turned into AstroTurf by them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burchell. Mr. Jack Medore is up, and after that I have Mr. Ed Rabin. I believe I hopefully got that correct, too. And if anyone else wants to speak, please, before I end up with the last two cards, fill one out. Mr. Medore, please.
Thanks. Appreciate the time of the board. I'm Jack Mador. I'm Vice Chair of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Sacramento, but I think I'm going to address my comments as an independent businessman of 30 years. And when I heard the comments about some of the qualified bidders in terms of lawsuits and indiscretions and this or that and disparaging staff, I can tell you and any of you who might be business owners that all of us get sued if you're in business for more than 5 or 10 years. And the merits of all those allegations is another treatise on studies and everything that I think we have to look to staff to have looked into. I think the comments that the financial entity that you're looking to is credible in the United States, and the detractors might say that Viola worldwide is in a spiral downfall because of the BDS efforts, I think is false. And to echo what's been said, this group and spokespeople of this group in different venues have tried to create discord and divisiveness in our community. In the Davis Food Co-op, they've attempted to have boycotts at CalPERS and the SAC Food Co-op. And all of those have been turned down, rebuffed, and said this is not the place to debate international political agendas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Next, I have Mr. Ed Rabin, and that's the last card I have of speakers. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ed Rabin, a longtime resident of Davis. I have two points that may seem unrelated, but I think you'll see that they're very closely related. Some time ago, I returned from a 2-week study trip to Tibet, where I was appalled by the mistreatment of the Tibetans by the Chinese. And what I would request of you is that you drop all of your work on providing clean water for Davis and Woodlands and investigate the question of whether anything in this room, such as an Apple computer or anything else, has been made in China. And if it's made in China, then I hope that you'll adopt a policy that no such products should be used by this commission. I'm waiting for laughter, but my second point is the main objection to Viola seems to be that they have built a light rail line in their parent company or an affiliated company has built a light rail line in Israel that goes through Jerusalem, serves both Jewish and Arab neighborhoods, that serves both people who live within the original Green Line, the original boundaries of Israel, and also serves people outside those lines, and that serves both Arabs and Jews without distinction. To me, this means that Veolia has done a wonderful thing for the people of that region, and which I hope would lead to better relations between those two peoples. I'll wind up by simply showing you a picture that you can easily find on the internet of this train in operation, showing both a Muslim woman and a religious Jewish man on the train, as well as a whole bunch of other people who can't possibly be identified as either Jewish or Palestinian or Arab or tourists or anything else. So you may find this of interest.
What am I looking at?
You may want to email it to us.
That's the one there?
You have 8 more seconds, Mr. Rabin. So, Mr. Rabin, you're going to now.
Yep.
Your 3 minutes is up, sir.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, my picture
Thank-
disappeared from my computer.
Technology is
Must
wonderful.
be Chinese.
And
It must be Chinese.
It was made in China. Another.
It's striking back.
thank you very much, Mr. Rabin. Having no other speakers' cards, I will close public comment, and I hope you please forgive me for trying to do what I'm asked to do, and that is to run an efficient meeting. If any of you want to speak to any of us, for as long as you want, we are all available, and I come from a city where we love to talk up at the Davis City Council far more than we should. So that takes us to comments and questions further that we may have. Anybody?
You want questions only, or you?
You can wrap questions and comments.
Okay, question. I'd just like to ask staff to kind of respond to the scope, kind of the scope of the investigation, and at least the comment that there's stuff out there that should have been within your scope that is apparently not within your scope.
The information we focused on was primarily the information provided by the respondents, plus some research. The problem with Internet research, as you guys may have discovered, is there's a lot of information out there, and it's hard to digest and discern between what's a significant charge against a company versus what's business as usual in the kind of business these guys are doing business in. And lawsuits happen. Disputes over payment happen. Discharges happen. There's investigations. There are, and that affects all these companies. But those types of charges, staff felt didn't rise to the level of challenging a company's business ethics. We focused on what we found as big and significant things that we've disclosed in our staff report, but didn't find others. That said, have we in January we talked about, well, gosh, should we maybe hire a consultant to go out and do a real thorough investigation of all these companies and find out what information is out there in the public domain, and we chose not to go down that path. Staff did the best we could based on what we were aware of and based on what information had previously been provided by others as well as the companies, and that's what we included. But as one of the speakers referenced, these companies are getting sued all the time, and we didn't have a litany of lawsuits. Criminal lawsuits are something different, and we did talk about one of those in here that's pending. But civil cases involving these companies do happen, and we did not include those, and we did not include what I would characterize as the garden variety regional board type investigation because some sewer agency violated a effluent limitation. So we did not include that level of information.
Yeah, but wasn't it also the case that in January obviously we set the scope as we did after a good amount of debate of how broad we were going to look, but I think we also invited people within that scope to give us cases that they wanted us to look at. And then the charge of the staff was going to be, that you'd do your review, but you'd also appropriately respond if people brought things to our attention, I think, on exactly this idea that, doing an Internet search, would bring all kinds of things, and we knew that. But if people had specific things that they thought were pertinent to the ethical investigation and the ethical inquiry that we were going forward with, that would happen. And is there any? That's in fact what we did, right?
Correct. And for example, Mr. Fabersoon and I have talked and we've corresponded in past months, but in recent months I haven't received anything from him, and I don't believe staff has. And so the sheet he handed out today, I haven't had a chance to evaluate this and this information. So I'm really not in a position to respond to that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No questions. No.
Comments?
Comment.
First of all, I want to welcome all the my comment is that you notice there were no speakers from Woodland, And we're focused on this water project and getting it done in the most cost-effective way that we can. I don't want to minimize ethical principles because I believe we are ethical in our community here, but my feeling is it's time to move on. I'm prepared to make a motion to that effect. I don't believe it's worthy to utilize more resources of this agency in these pursuits at this point in time. I actually have read everything that's come to me, and it's been voluminous. And I feel like I've digested it. I've asked the questions that I felt I needed to ask. And I strongly believe that this is not the forum to debate international issues. And so I make a motion such as is stated in paragraph 1 under the staff recommendation. And if you'd like, I'll repeat that.
Why don't you repeat it, but we'll see a second, but I would like to complete comments first, too.
You can do that after. My motion is to move to find and determine that each DBO proposer team and the key companies in each team adhere to reasonable ethical principles and standards in the conduct of their business, and to affirm the qualifications of each DBO team to proceed. That means all 3 teams would proceed with the request for proposals phase of the procurement.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded.
I have further comment.
Further comments, please.
Thank you.
Marty.
Thank you. First of all, I concur with Dr. Marble. A lot of the issues that have been brought up are far beyond the resources and also the charge of this board. However, I don't feel that this has been a wasted effort. I know that you say, why are we doing this? I don't feel bad that we took this action. I'm glad that we did it. I don't think it was a waste of our time or our staff's time. I hope in the future other projects go through something similar like this. I wasn't especially, I'm glad to find out about business ethics, but I was looking for things like labor ethics. I was looking for things also like environmental ethics, if they're environmentally conscious kinds of companies. And also, one of the things we asked was that they focus on local labor. We want the local working people whose money we're spending to build this to be benefiting from it. We want them to be part of the workforce that builds it. So I don't think that those are inappropriate things for this board to ask. And I don't think a review of these companies was an inappropriate thing to ask. I'm glad for the results that we got. I've seconded the motion, and I support that we move forward with the project. I support staff's findings. I don't see anything here that would preclude us going forward with all 3 of the companies or the groups.
Other comments?
Done a tremendous amount of reading and a good amount of thinking on this. Really trying to think about where we appropriately draw the line here and how far we go in our inquiries. And I would certainly echo Marty's comments that I think that this is a valuable exercise for us to go through. This is arguably the largest public works project that's going to happen in the Sacramento region, maybe even for the next half decade or decade perhaps. This is our community spending $325 minus $4 million on a project. So it's valuable to do that. The inquiry, though, is about whether, to me, this is about the companies that we're going to let come into this community to do a body of work for us that our citizens are going to pay for. And the question is, in the operation of this project and the operation of the construction of this and so on, are these companies appropriate to bring into this community? And that is a question of their overall ethical standards as a company. The second layer is the bidding document and all of the things that we are going to require of this company. So I am satisfied, and I appreciate the staff's work on this, that the companies that are bidding have assured us that they have the ethical protections in place to come into this community and do this work under our bidding documents that we are going to put out. So I'm pleased that we did this. I know we have spent a lot of staff time. I think we've also asked our community to pay for that staff time, and I do think that that money has been money well spent. But I'm satisfied with where we've gotten, and I'm pleased that we've handled this up front so that the bidding process can go forward with a good assurance that to the citizens that we've done our due diligence at the front end of this. We're not going to apply international law here, and we're not going to act as another government. Whether another government does or doesn't do certain things, that is up to them. That is not up to us. But I'm convinced that the companies that we're prepared to bring into this community to do this work have sufficient ethical standards to respond to our bid documents and to carry this out. So I'm supportive of the motion that's been made. I'm also appreciative of all those who've come before us here and the staff work that have gone into this. I don't know that other agencies in the community are going to go as far as we went. We're, I think, very fortunate to have very good legal counsel here that rolled up their sleeves and thought deeply about how to respond to the request from this board, and for that I'm appreciative, and perhaps it is a bit of a model for others. We'll see as we go forward.
Thank you. I would add that in today's climate, in which we've often questioned the ethics of corporations over the last few years, the exercise that we have just gone through has been very valuable, has been a learning process for me. I've read all the material that's been brought to me, and I think it was something we needed to do because, as has been pointed out, this is, for our two communities, the largest project that's been built in this area. And I think it was incumbent upon us to go through that exercise. And for somebody who has spent a great bit of my life in the process of securing human rights and following ethical standards, in protesting investment in countries where the human rights of their citizens have been violated, I don't shrink from that charge as an individual. On behalf of an agency, on behalf of the public of which I represent, I have to represent all of the views of the community, and I'm seeking to do that here today and through this process. I think that we also have done something that is unprecedented in that we went through a process that took quite a bit of time, that requested an awful lot of information of all three of the DBO teams, that in all of my experience on boards of directors, on JPA agencies, and as a council member, I've never seen us do. Not one time for any one of the contracts that we were seeking to award. Even as a director of Yolo County Transportation Agency, which is operated by Veolia Transportation, we never went through this process, not once. So I think that what we have done far exceeds what anyone else has done, and hopefully you are correct, Joe, that we are setting a standard for all contracts that you have to evaluate not only the ethics from an environmental standpoint, but from a sociological standpoint also. I think that it just, in these times, I think is important to do. It can't be done within a context of requiring a large expenditure of money. We could have gone to an international law firm and requested full review, but we sought as a board to do this in a way that honored the process, but did it at the least amount of cost that we could. And then finally, I think whatever entity we hire, we are looking at not just the guarantor, but we were looking at all of the entities that are underneath it. And when it comes to the construction, in some cases, there'll be a separate entity from the actual operator. And I think we did a thorough review of all of the entities involved in the process. And so I think, given all of that, I believe the request for additional information concerning business ethics has been thorough and complete, and I'm satisfied with the results, such that I am willing to support the motion and go forward with these three firms. So we have, if there's no further comments, we have a motion before us. All in favor, say aye.
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 It passes unanimously. Thank you all for coming here very much. I appreciate your time coming here and appreciate all the communications you've given us.
I need to leave close to 5 to be good. I need to leave close to 5. I think
Bill does also. I've just been informed that two of our members Well, I knew one had to, but I know that they both need to leave by 5 so that it...
I could slip a little too.
Okay, good. We have, let's move straight to item 7 then, and if we could,
Mr. Chairman, board members, this is a request to approve additional funds for Environmental Services Associates in the amount of $74,262. This is for environmental and permitting work associated with the alternative treatment plant site that we discussed earlier, as well as a realignment of a portion of the Davis treated water pipeline.
Is there any questions?
No.
No questions?
I'll move approval. And
Second.
Woodland's paying, right?
Right.
You're quite happy to spend our money, I see.
No? No, this is the alternative site?
No, as General Manager Deemer said, this is also for some additional environmental work for a slightly different alignment of the treated water pipeline down near County Road 28H. We're investigating an alternative alignment, and this has some of this cost is related to a Davis-only cost.
Okay, good. Well, I withdraw my motion. If Woodland's not paying, I'm not, no. My motion continues.
Second.
Question.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Passes unanimously. That takes us to item 8, our presentation discussion of the draft budget.
Board members, in your packet, you have some rather detailed spreadsheets that lay out our proposed budget for FY12 and 13. You have Exhibit A, which is a breakdown by task and by line item of the requested budget. Exhibit B is a 10-year spreadsheet that summarizes the major categories over a 10-year period. And Exhibit C is a table that shows the various consultants that will be working on the project, their particular area of expertise, and the amount of the proposed work that they will be doing. What I'd like to do in the next 10 to 15 minutes is give you a brief overview of the budget. I'd like to start with some very good news relative to the total project cost estimate. As part of our budget setting and budget making process, we've updated the surface water project cost update. We'll go through provide an overview of the proposed budget. I want to tell you how this compares to the budget that you approved in this past January and describe the next steps in the budget process. So to the surface water project cost update. This is a table that you've seen before. The number that has been reported for the last year or so for the total project cost is $337 million. 176 of that for Woodland and 160 for Davis. This is in July 2011 dollars. The first thing we did is we updated the construction costs to July 2012 dollars, and basically what we did is took the construction costs, the treatment plant costs, and updated it by the ENR index. Is about a 2.1% increase. So the new cost with the same elements and the same facilities would go to $340 million compared to $337 in July 2011 dollars. We've also taken this opportunity to incorporate a number of cost savings that we've identified over the past year. And so in April 2012 dollars, the new total cost for the project is $299.6 million. $152 million to Woodland and $146.7 for Davis. So compared to the $337 million that we're reporting last year, we've taken about $37 million out of the total project cost.
Does that include the $4 million we approved today?
It does, and I'm going to show you then the major components.
So you assumed we'd approve that?
I guess I did.
For discussion.
It was an educated guess.
So this is just another view of that same information in the same format that we showed it to you last year, the $299, and the reduction in the construction costs you see here, $214 million. And These construction costs not only include the actual physical construction, but in case of the DBO contract, it's the design and the construction, it's services, engineering services during construction, it's environmental construction, monitoring, et cetera. So it's the entire cost associated with the construction. And to your point, Dr. Marble, how did we save the $37 million? First thing is we talked a few board meetings ago about the fact that the DBO process was going to save some money. We had a discussion with our Facilities Procurement Committee, our DBO experts. They were comfortable identifying at least a 10% savings at this point in time. We reported that to the board, and both Davis and Woodland have subsequently folded that into their rate-setting processes, but we hadn't officially reflected it in our total project cost estimate. Woodland has decided to take a different approach with how they provide storage for the treated water. So initially they had the storage at the regional water treatment facility. They've moved that out into the future and identified ways to provide that storage within the existing distribution system or new facilities within the distribution system. Dr. Marble, this is the site relocation, the $4 million that we talked about earlier. And also, through our discussions with the DBO teams, there's a provision that requires private financing in order to use the design, build, operate, procurement method. We had some very stringent requirements for the private financing in consultation with the DBO teams and also our attorneys and experts. We were able to lower those requirements and the carrying costs for the private financing to the tune of $8.2 million. This is essentially how we lowered the cost from $337 down to the $299.6 million. There's no further questions. Just one final comment on that.
Quick question on that by me. I gather, and I'll reiterate, and I try and do this every time we come to these numbers, these are engineering estimates.
These are engineering estimates. But as we continue to make progress on a number of portions of the project, our estimates get better and better, and our range of error less and less. As we procure some of the easements and those sorts of things, our numbers get much more reliable. I would just say, in order to formalize this new number, when we bring back the final budget proposal next month, we'll have this laid out for you in a memo in additional detail for you.
I also noted Tuesday night at our council meeting an article that was in the Journal of American Civil Engineering back in July of 2011 that spoke to the savings that have been achieved through the DBO process. And the numbers that, this is a peer-reviewed article of, I believe, close to 700 different firms or different projects, they saw 43% reduction in savings through the DBO process versus the design, bid, build. So just lay that out there. It's, it's probably a higher number than we've been estimating, but it's what a peer-reviewed article has substantiated.
But we're continue to be hopeful that when we actually engage the DBO teams and get their thoughts and their innovation and creativity, that we'll be able to bring that down further. But at this point, we want to not overstate that potential. That's why we take.
You're not allowed to go up, Dennis. Once you've come down, there's a max there now. So
I think we're aware of that. That's why we've thought long and hard about this new number.
Dennis, Marty has a question.
You mentioned private financing. What does that apply to?
There's a government code provision, and maybe Dick can speak to it in more detail. It's 5956, but it basically requires the private financing component in order to have a public agency like Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency use the design, build, operate, procurement method.
I'm not understanding. I thought we were going to be publicly financing the whole project.
The mechanism that we had included in the RFP was to retain a portion of the earnings until the end of the project, have the DBO team carry the cost of that financing, and pay it off when the project was done.
Okay.
And we've lessened that amount that has to be retained, and that's where the $8 million comes from.
I understand now. Thanks.
And we will continue to our lobbying efforts and with the federal government to seek.
That's a good point. This well, it's a slightly different subject, but how you pay for the 299 is the pursuit of grants and loans, and we'll continue to aggressively do that as well. Let me next turn to the actual proposed budget. This is a summary of the rather lengthy Exhibit A that you have. These are the major cost categories that build the 2012-13 budget. Just point out in this column, this was the budget as amended on January 19th this past year. So what this reflects is the first 6 months of expenditure and then the budget that you set for the calendar year, the first 6 months of the calendar year on July 19th. That's the $6.6 million budget for the current fiscal year. We're projecting coming in about $600,000 to $700,000 under that this June. And our proposed budget for FY 12-13 is the $10.7 million that you see here. And let me, I know it's getting late, but I'll walk through very quickly what's included in that $10.7 million in each of the major categories. We have the agency administration, $738,000. That's your staff's time, myself, agency secretary, treasurer, legal counsel, lobbyists, public outreach efforts, organizational memberships, and a contingency on that amount that's set of 10%. Program management, $927,000. This is technical assistance to the agencies and cities. It's the administration of the project, if you will, the monthly meetings, the management of the intake project in concert with RD 2035, budgeting, scheduling, pursuing grants and loans, and engaging with the DBO teams. Pre-design, $485,000 this coming year. We'll be doing some studies to make sure that we can safely and without incident introduce the treated surface water into the current groundwater supply. We want to do some chloramine mixing studies to make sure that the chemical interactions are well understood and not problematic. We'll be continuing our water quality sampling, geotechnical investigations, and further investigations into, again, how the new surface water system will integrate and be introduced to the existing groundwater system. We have some work to do on water rights permits to the tune of $365,000, specifically revising our permit to accommodate aqueduct storage and recovery. Environmental and permitting, much of what we've talked about earlier, continuing the regulatory permit applications, updating the sequent permitting for the new treatment plant site and the realigned portion of the Davis treated water line, and surface water supply. This is being paid for by Davis. This is ASR recovery testing of their new ASR system. Lands rights-of-way, continuing our process to obtain all the necessary rights-of-way and property rights. This number of $565,000 is largely money that was budgeted in the second half of this current fiscal year. It's being rolled over as we continue that process and are finding the conversations with the property owners to be somewhat more involved and lengthy. Design, the $2.2 million. This is the DBO contract procurement and related power studies. There's a 10% contingency on this, on the engineering services associated with all engineering tasks in the contract. We have construction, $4.326 million, and that's primarily the regional water treatment facility site fill and the associated geotechnical work, the monitoring. Also involves the construction and engineering services of the joint intake site, which, as currently scheduled, will begin the latter part of the fiscal year. And we've identified a capital contingency of 5% of the construction amount.
I'm sorry. What does the word contingency mean in this context? This is potential overrun? Is it?
It's money that's built in. It's set aside. It's in this case, 5% of this roughly $4.3 million, and it's that's not right. It's
a little more than 10%.
It's
more like 10 or 8. 9, yeah, 9%,
Yeah.
9.5.
It is, it covers, it's 5% of line items 14 through 184. So it's not all of that construction.
So it's money we're budgeting that it's a contingency. We hope we won't have to spend it.
That's
but
exactly
it's
right.
there. So, and it's in the bud, yeah, okay, good.
That's so. This is a table that is not in your packet. We'll provide this as part of the final budget recommendation, but this essentially shows you how we take the $10.7 million proposed budget and how we expect the cash flow to occur over the 4 quarters of the next fiscal year. I want to focus specifically on the first 2 quarters, and it's roughly $7.1 million between now, or between the start of the fiscal year in July and the end of the calendar year, $7.1 million. This is a summary of your Exhibit C that is in your board packet. It identifies all of the companies that we are proposing to have contracts with. It provides the types of services, the amount, and importantly, the subcontracted amount. In West Yost case in particular, they are subcontracting a significant portion of their work to geotechnical firms and other specialty firms. And similarly, with respect to the BKS Dick's firm, a significant portion of that subcontracted amount is for the specialty DBO experts that we're using on the DBO process. So let me compare just quickly to wrap up the what you approved on January of this past year was a budget of $10.16 million, and that spanned the calendar year. So that was intended to take us through December and through the point in time when the two cities had their rate issues, time to resolve their rate issues. The proposed budget for the calendar year is slightly under that. It's the last 6 months of the budget that was approved in January for this fiscal year, and it's the first 6 months of the proposed budget that I described to you just a minute ago for this upcoming fiscal year. You can see the Davis and Woodland shares here. So the point with this is that the proposed budget adheres to and is consistent with the calendar year budget that the board approved on January 19th of this year. Next steps, we would propose to come back in May and ask you to adopt a final budget, incorporating any comments or suggestions that you have for us today. We would follow that in June with consideration of the contracts that I identified and mentioned for you earlier. Many of them are on a fiscal year basis, so the current agreements need to be renewed as of July 1st of next year. And then in the August board meeting, as we've already discussed earlier, the site fill construction contract topic for that meeting. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Your 15 minutes is up, Mr. Deemer. Thank you very much. Yes, questions? No. This is, no action is requested here, just direction. And having no questions or any direction offered, that moves us into long-range calendar. Yes, Mr. Meyer.
Before you leave that, when we talk about the reductions that we've looked at here, and we've looked at the numbers in the spreadsheets, I'd like to remind the board that this is really from the brilliant work put together by the team, the aggressive attitude that they've had to finding cost savings and finding ways to bring quality product through a reduced cost. And I just want to remind the board that we really have a wonderful group of in-house and consulting staff that have put together a tremendous effort to provide this. Thank you.
And thank you, and we expect that you'll continue doing that. Thank you very much. No further comments this time. We will move the long-range board calendar. Any questions on that calendar? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Being none, we don't need to adopt it at this point in time, so we'll move to correspondence. I note that we have 2 letters as correspondence. One of them we mentioned at our last board meeting. The second one is, I believe, one that came in after the fact and is also in our packet. I think that in and of themselves, we all got them and read them, so we don't need any comment from staff on that. So that would move us, unless there's questions on them. Seeing none. Technical Advisory Committee comments. No comments?
I'd like to report that the City of Woodland 218 process has been completed. The protest ballots, we received 2007 protests, was a 5-0 vote to increase the rates as proposed, and we'll be looking at the second reading possibly in the next 2 weeks. So that should help move us forward.
Great.
That's all we have to report.
Thank you very much. Board member comments. Any board member comments? No. Comments? Seeing none. Joe?
I'll mention something. It's, I just thought about it a minute ago. I'll send you guys all the link. I sent it to Sid yesterday. A bunch of work I did on fish law back when I was in law school was kind of got pulled into a law review article, and so I was published in the UC Davis Law Review as of yesterday with Kerrigan Bork, Peter Moyle, Jacob Katz, and I on Fish and Game Code, Section 5937, which is all about letting water below dams for fish. And the slight relevance is that Fish and Game Code provision really grew out of a state senator's concern who was in Reading, and he was worried specifically about Shasta Dam construction. And when Shasta Dam was constructed, the fact that enough water might not flow down the Sacramento to keep the fish past Reading in good condition. And that was one of the big motivations for that Fish and Game Code provision. It was then used to really save the Mono Basin and our local Puda Creek. So I'll send all you guys that link. That was kind of my kind of rebirth, or a slight little blip back into California water law. So.
I would just note, I think we all probably got I believe it's the WRA latest update on pending or ascending or descending rates amongst most of the California cities. I think it's primarily California and Nevada, if I'm not mistaken.
It was the AWWA. Cal Neva section.
And that, if you didn't get it, I would hope that we should all have a copy of it.
Lynn, could you send that? If it came through, I didn't track on it.
If it is electronically submitted, that would be great, because I'd like to forward that on to a few folks.
Yeah, everybody should. Yeah.
I'd like it.
And if it isn't on the website, it should be on the website,
put it up on
too.
Documents, yeah.
That was a pretty...
Monique, do you know if the rate study's on the website?
It's hard to explain to people.
Yes, that would be great. Great to do. Seeing no further business, motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.